inspiration and why do any of the stuff we do. Um, you know, really, like why go into computer science or why go into chemistry or any other field? You know, being a musician, being an artist, and it's doing what you love, and you gotta follow your passion in life. Yeah, whether it's carpentry or being a doctor, doing anything. You really got to take your passion with you because that's what's going to fuel you. That gives you the gasoline or the fuel to keep going. And especially that's what I ran into in college. I wouldn't have been able to make it through college if it wasn't for the fact that I loved what I did and I was really inspired to do what I did. Um, I was fortunate enough to have a great mother as well to, buy me Super Nintendo back in '93, and getting further than me in Donkey Kong Country originally, and man, those games were hard back then. So there was no autosave, there was no difficulty slider. Video games for Super Nintendo were made for the same hardcore people as they were for the people that never played games. So yeah, it was rough, but it really inspired me. And then when PlayStation came out and I got Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VII was earth-shattering to me in an amazing way. It still inspires me to today, and that's one of the main inspirations of what I went into because it was, for those of you not really familiar with Final Fantasy and why there are so many of them. They're kind of like short stories, but they all take place in the same universe. But 7 in particular was because the PlayStation had just come out. Um, this was the first major Final Fantasy to really reach American audiences. Like there were others for Super Nintendo, but they didn't really click with a majority of people. And when 7 came out, it had such a captivating story, graphics, gameplay. Everything was 5 stars. Like everything was dead on. Absolutely amazing. And it was also I touched upon this briefly in the introduction that um, it was it was a time when the games were going from becoming just being a toy and becoming an entertainment medium. And these games now had such depth and um, just really just amazing story. It's hard to really put into terms, but we all have our own things that inspire us. Um, and that's what really fuels you to keep going. Um, and there are plenty of other games that I've played, throughout the years that are also absolutely amazing. Um, but what else did I want to talk about? Um, yeah, um, you really got to do what you love. You can't really, people, sometimes, just try to chase money and stuff or try to do something for the money, but it doesn't really work out because in order to make the money, you have to have the passion to want to do what you do well, or try or attempt to do it well. um, but anyway, uh, what other stuff can we talk about? I was gonna take a drink for a second. Hmm. Well, we can also talk about robotics a bit too. I started getting into that with Raspberry Pi, and it's really cool. Oh, cool. Someone's in the chat. Hey, Spidge, how you doing? But it depends. Really what you want to do with me for game development. I kind of got into after Final Fantasy VII. I was really hooked on video games, and I always wanted to make them. Um, And yeah, I got into programming back in late high school. I had a great teacher, Miss Duchin, at Glen Cove High School, and it's amazing. I really struggled at first, but um, the more you keep doing it, and then passion and having the fuel to keep doing something is always going to overtake natural talent. In my mind, at least. It might take a few more years for you to get there, but the passion, you know, it's more enjoyable as well. But I struggled with programming. Java was my first language, but it took me really a while to kind of wrap my head around programming, and then on top of that, object-oriented programming. Um, but yeah, you gotta enjoy what you do. Um, I'm trying to think actually now going back to Final Fantasy VII. Um, like what's very interesting about Final Fantasy VII and what a lot of people don't know is a lot of the game was inspired by the band My Bloody Valentine and the Loveless album. It was an Irish shoegaze band, kind of like a punk rock type trippy music, and the inspiration of that heavily inspired Final Fantasy VII and a lot of things in it. So it's just very interesting how a game from an Irish shoegaze band inspires a Japanese team to make one of the greatest games of all time, which inspires millions of people across the world. It's just interesting how that's why the arts are just as important as sciences. Um, because we feed off of each other's inspiration, and it's a network like that. Um, but yeah, I started getting into robotics also. It's funny. I was thinking the other day about. Do you guys remember that movie Short Circuit with Johnny Five? I used to love that robot, but yeah, that was pretty funny. But yeah, I started getting into robotics recently with the Raspberry Pi because it's like a little mini computer, literally about this big. Actually, I can probably grab one out of a box real quick. But it's like a little mini computer. Okay, this one I think I broke a while back. It looks like this. And it's a little mini computer. And you can, there are different types of pins you could put wires to, and you can write programs to basically do stuff like drive motors. You can hook up temperature sensors to this, gas sensors, anything really. There's a lot of things you can do. So it's fun to kind of make. I enjoy making robots too, or I just started making them recently, and that's what making games, making robots, all this stuff, programming and computer science is really the base of all this stuff. Um, you know, the code is what kind of gives the intelligence to the hardware, or puts the ghost into the machine, if you like. Yeah. I love that anime, by the way. Ghost in the Shell. Another inspiration. There we go. More things to inspire you. Ghost in the Shell really inspired me a lot. I really loved anime because when I found Final Fantasy VII, I really loved it, and then later, as the internet came out and I got that, um, I discovered anime, and I was like, oh, this is just like Final Fantasy VII because it's kind of like that same shtick. Uh, but it's funny. Back with Final Fantasy VII, this was back before the internet. So you used to, in the little guidebook, there was a 900 number you could call, and 900 numbers back then were also the same things for phone sex. So pay by the minute for Yeah, and a 1-900 number for hooked up to Sony's help desk where you could ask questions like I'm stuck at this point, and they'd be like, okay, did you go here, did you do that, and they would guide you through for like $2 a minute, I think it was. So um, those are interesting times. Those are interesting times right before the internet. um, Having to go to like libraries and look shit up, and then like by the time I learned that, like in elementary school, like all that stuff was like, nah, internet, all that. Yeah. That's how technology is now. Sometimes that's all right. But now we obviously have a problem with misinformation and disinformation. People intentionally spreading misinformation out there on the internet. But it'll evolve and we'll get through it. Science always prevails, just inevitably. Um, but yeah, as we get more people too, or anybody that has any specific computer science questions, I can help. I can help answer some of that too. Oh yeah, um, if you have about $1,000 to spare, I highly recommend either VR, because VR is really good. Although there aren't that many games out there. My game is free to play though. Plug. Um, but it's and a 3D printer. Those are really awesome. I got a 3D printer behind me over here, and it's really good. It really comes in handy for stuff. Um, because you don't have to design your own parts. You just go to thingiverse.com, and it's just like people upload tons of stuff you can just print out. Um, Really comes in handy. But you gotta kind of spend the money on the 3D printer. You gotta spend at least 1,000, because there's a lot of calibrations and stuff that go into it, and if you get like a cheap one, they rely on you to do the calibration. No, no. No. Yeah. So, um, what else do we want to talk about? But yeah, when I first got into computer science, it was 11th grade in high school with Visual Basic. Technically, was my first language, so that was cool. But then Java, is where you really put your pants on, and then later on, um, once I got used to Java and doing object-oriented programming and stuff like that. Excuse me, throat's dry. Once I got into stuff like that, I really wanted to do game development, so I started with XNA, which was Xbox developing kit. Um, and making small games like that, and then later on teaching myself DirectX and OpenGL, and having to learn about worldview and projection matrices eventually, and all that crazy stuff. Um, which is luckily built into like engines like Unity and Unreal Engine, so you typically don't have to worry about that. But that's for another time. And then with game development, you really, for a long time, and up until very recently, you really needed to do everything in C++, and you still kind of do. I like C++, but it's a difficult language because it's both object-oriented programming and also incorporates low-level C programming as well, with pointers and all that good stuff. But it's a really powerful language, and it's good stuff. I use it for Unreal Engine, and